Section 4.3 gets into a review of right triangle trigonometry. And just a quick review of what we did in the previous section and what you covered in geometry. Two main triangles that we've got, the 30-60-90 and the 45-45-90. When we want to find the relationships of the different sides of these triangles, we've got some facts that we've memorized. First, with the 30-60-90 degree triangle, we start with the short side and we declare that as x. That means if I look at the long side, or the side that's across from the 60 degree angle, that's going to be x times the square root of 3. The hypotenuse, the longest side, or the side across from the 90 degree angle, is going to be 2 times the short side. Now, this relationship here with 2 times the short side, let's say I gave you the hypotenuse, we know that then the short side would be half the hypotenuse. So we can adjust those relationships based off of the information that we're given. The second triangle was the 45-45-90, and 45-45-90 triangle has 2 sides that are equal, which we designate as x, and the hypotenuse is the side times the square root of 2. And once again, if I give you the hypotenuse to find the sides, I can divide by square root of 2. So as a review from the unit circle, what we specifically looked at is how we came up with these different angle measurements and line segments for each side, given the fact that the hypotenuse is 1. Remember, all these have hypotenuse of 1 since the unit circle indicates a radius of 1, and it's just a matter of recalling what the other sides were. Looking at our 30-60-90 triangle, if I know my hypotenuse is 1, I can find the short side, and from this relationship, the hypotenuse is twice the short side. So I can also say the short side is half the hypotenuse, which means the short side is half. And since I have the short side being half, I now know the long side is 1/2 times square root of 3, which is square root of 3 over 2. Same relationship is true in the 30-60-90, where the short side is going to be 1/2, the long side is square root of 3 over 2. And the 45-45-90, since I'm giving you the hypotenuse as being 1, we divide by square root of 2 for each of the sides, which means I come up with square root of 2 over 2 as being the 2 lengths of those triangles. And those are values that you saw in the unit circle. Now, this thought process is important because we're not always going to have values that are directly on the unit circle, but still we want to understand the hypotenuse will be 1 and there'll be some relationship that we can use to figure out the other sides. These right here, specifically the 30, 45, and 60 degree angles, create special right triangles. But if our angle lies on the x or y axis, it does not form a triangle, and we call it a quadrantal angle, which basically means it's going to be a 90 degree angle or it's going to be a 180 degree angle. There is no third side that we can see to form a triangle. So let's walk through one example of that. Find the 6 trig functions for the given quadrantal angle. And the quadrantal angle here is the straight line, which is going to be 180 degrees, or as we talked about in radians, it's going to be pi. Now, what is the value on the unit circle for the point right here? Well, it's the value -1, 0. -1 being the x value, 0 being the y value. So then we begin by looking at all the different relationships that we looked in the last section for sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. We know sine are the y values. So in this case, the sine of pi is the y value, which is going to be 0. Cosine are the x values. So the x value is -1. And then tangent is y divided by x. So 0 divided by -1, which is 0. The other 3 are the reciprocal trig functions. So for cosecant, instead of us having y, it is now 1 over y, which is 1 over 0, which is undefined. The secant is 1 over the cosine, which is the same thing as 1 over x. So that's going to be 1 over -1, which is still -1. And then finally, cotangent is x divided by y, which is going to be -1 divided by 0, which once again is undefined.